Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, brothers and sisters. So in today's video, we're going to be reading the second word of the Risale-i Nur. And I'm sorry I didn't make a video yesterday on Jummah. I actually did, but the footage was really dark, so I had to retake it. Now, this chapter of the Risale-i Nur will show how Islam changes your vision of the world. Okay? So let's get started. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Those who believe in the unseen. So the Risale-i Nur starts by referencing this verse from the Quran. Those who believe in the unseen. Okay? And the unseen has different meanings. The unseen means the afterlife, the resurrection, the existence of angels, paradise, hell, all of these things are unseen. Okay? There are also other meanings to the unseen as well. So, for example, the reality behind death. We don't know the reality behind death. Okay? I mean, you see the person die, but what happens to them afterwards? We don't know that. That's also part of the unseen. Another one is hardship or suffering. What's the meaning behind suffering? We might have like a general idea, like, God is testing us, or maybe God wants to absolve us of our sins. But once again, we don't know the wisdom behind it. That's also part of the unseen. And so this chapter of the Risale-i Nur, the second word, is about this verse in the Quran. Okay? And it is going to show us how the difference between having belief versus not having belief. Okay? If you want to understand what great happiness and bounty, what great pleasure and ease are to be found in belief in God, listen to the story which is in the form of a comparison. So it is saying that with belief, there is great happiness, there is great bounty, there is great pleasure, and there is great ease. Now, it's not the Risale-i Nur is not going to just say that and be done. It's going to give us a story to help illustrate this point. One time, two men went on a journey for both pleasure and business. One set off in a selfish, inauspicious direction, and the other on a godly, propitious way. So these two men are going on the journey, and maybe they're merchants, maybe they're traders, or they have some other craft. They're going for pleasure and business. Now, one of the men sets on and goes on his journey, and he's only thinking about himself. He's only concerned with his own interests, with his own well-being, in disregard of others. And he's also inauspicious, so he's not really inclined to do good. The other man, however, is godly and propitious. By the way, I hope I'm pronouncing these words correctly. Godly means devout or pious, and propitious means being inclined to do good to others. Since the selfish man was both conceited, self-centered, and pessimistic, he ended up in what seemed to him to be a most wicked country due to his pessimism. So the two men, they go into the same country, okay? But they have two very different perspectives of how the country looks to them in their eyes. So for the first man, because this first man is very pessimistic means having a very negative outlook of things, or expecting the worst possible outcome. Because he's pessimistic, because he's self-centered, which is similar to selfish, thinking and concerned about only yourself. And because he was conceited, so because he thought very highly of himself, he ended up in what seemed to him to be a most wicked country due to his pessimism. So the country looks very negative to him because of his pessimism. So he had a negative outlook, and that negative outlook caused the country to look negative to him. He looked around and everywhere saw the powerless and the unfortunate lamenting and the grasp of fearsome bullying tyrants weeping at their destruction. So what is he seeing? He's seeing weeping, he's seeing destruction, he's seeing tyranny. He saw the same grievous, painful situation in all the places he traveled. And wherever he goes in this country, he also sees tyranny there. He also sees destruction there. He also sees suffering there. The whole country took on the form of a house of mourning. So it just became this country became this place where people were mourning under the blows of suffering and oppression. Apart from becoming drunk, he could find no way of not noticing this grievous and somber situation. So apart from drinking, which is a temporary escape, he can't make himself oblivious to all of these horrific things that are happening around him, okay? Once again, like I said, drinking is only a temporary escape. For everyone seemed to him to be an enemy and foreign. Everyone, everything in this country was an enemy to him. Now, how does this apply in real life? How does this apply in real life? So, for example, um, death. Depending on your perspective or your outlook, death can either be a friend to you or an enemy. Now, if you think, okay, well, when I die, I'm going to just perish into non-existence and I'm going to be eternally separated from my loved ones, well, you're going to see death as an enemy, okay? You would also see aging as an enemy because it also nears you towards death, okay? So perspective. Even like the beings around you can be an enemy. So, for example, the ground. Now, I might be thinking, how can the soil be an enemy? Well, when an earthquake happens, the soil can swallow you up. Is that not true? That's an enemy to you. Or, for example, a volcano. A volcano can be an enemy if it erupts. It might end up killing you. That's also an enemy. Okay. So everyone seemed to him an enemy and foreign. And all around he saw horrible corpses and despairing, weeping orphans. Now, by orphans, it's referring to a concept known as cosmic orphans. At least I believe it's referring to that. And cosmic orphans means like when you don't believe in a creator, you're not you what ends up happening is you don't believe that you have an owner. You don't believe in someone who created you. And as a result, you end up becoming an orphan, someone who doesn't have an owner. You don't think that there was a higher force that created you. So you become like an orphan. And when it talks about horrible corpses, so you look at all these beings around you, for example, the mountains, you look at the ocean, you look at the trees, you look at, the grass, the ground, all the beings, right? These are just a few examples, right? Now, when you have belief, you think these things have an owner, these things have a creator, these things are the servants of that creator. But when you don't have belief, you see them as these corpses, as these lifeless beings that can also be enemies to you. Okay? His conscience was in a state of torment. So he's just tormented by all of these horrific things that he's seeing around you. And not only he's pained at the suffering of others and ends up suffering himself. But now the Risale-i Nur is going to contrast this first man with the second man. The other man was godly, devout, fair-minded, and with fine morals, so that the country he came to was most excellent in his view. So the first man, because he was pessimistic, because he had a very negative outlook, the country therefore looked negative to him. But the first man, because he has very good characteristics, because he's godly, he's devout, so he's very devoted to God and the reverence of God. He's fair-minded, so he's unprejudiced, he's just, and because he has fine morals, because it was because of these good characteristics, this positive outlook, that the country came to as most excellent in his view. It looked positive to him. This good man saw universal rejoicing in the land he entered. He saw everyone celebrating. Everywhere was a joyful festival, a place where you go to celebrate and have fun, a place for the remembrance of God, overflowing with rapture and happiness. And rapture, by the way, means ecstasy and passion. So this country was this place where people were, like in a festival, they were celebrating, they were remembering God with passion and ecstasy. Everyone seemed to him a friend and a relation. So, for example, for the first man, everything is an enemy. But for the second man, everything is a friend. For example, death can be a friend to you. Because if you think, okay, well, when I die, when death comes to me, I'm going to be able to leave this burdensome life with all of its burdens, with all of its, which is very tiring, which is very stressful. I'm going to be able to leave this life and I'm going to be able to go to a much better life. Okay? And in that life, it's going to be eternal. The pleasures I'm going to experience are eternal. I won't feel any hardship or suffering there. Okay, so you can see death as a very welcomed friend. Okay, you can also see aging or other things as that way too. For example, the trees or the ground, you can also see those as a friend because you think they are under the command of God. Okay, for example, in another part of the Risale-i Nur, it talks about how if a believer, someone who has belief, saw even like a meteor or something like, like a meteor falling towards Earth, he wouldn't feel terrified. He would, in fact, be in awe of God because he knows that's under the command of God. Where were we? Hmm, yes. Throughout the country, he saw the festive celebrations of a general discharge from duties accompanied by cries of good wishes and thanks. So this discharge of duties actually refers to death, okay? Once again, based on perspective, you can see death as either permanent, eternal annihilation and separation from your loved ones, or you can see it as being able to ascend to a much better life. Okay, so when we come into this world, we have a duty. We're not just left to our devices. We're come here to do good deeds. We're come here to worship the Creator. And sometimes, like I said, this life gets really burdensome. And so when we leave this life, it's like a discharge from duties. He also heard the sound of a drum and band for the enlistments of soldiers with happy calls of God is most great and there is no God but God. And this is referring to the people who newly come into this world, the people who are born. Rather than seeing them as people who are just coming into this world and are going to suffer, he sees them as people who are being enlisted into the army, right? People, so, when you enlist into the army, what are you doing? You're taking up a duty, right? You have a duty. There's a reason you're doing it, all right? You have a duty to serve and protect your nation, okay? Fight for your nation. So just like that, when we come into this world, we come with a duty. We have different obligations, okay? That's why it's called an enlistment of soldiers with happy calls of God is most great, and there is no God but God. Rather than being grieved at the suffering of both himself and all the people like the first miserable man, this fortunate man was pleased and happy at both his own joy and that of all the inhabitants. Furthermore, he was able to do some profitable trade. He offered thanks to God. So we're going to stop here, but I would like to summarize what we've read so far. Inshallah, we'll finish the other part in the second video. But what was this chapter about? Well, we should remember that verse for those who believe in the unseen. Okay, so it kind of this story, this chapter in the Risale-i Nur contrasts when you believe in the unseen versus not having belief in the unseen. The first man doesn't believe in the unseen, therefore everything seems like an enemy to him. Everything, the suffering, the hardships are meaningless. He doesn't believe everything is like a corpse. It's like an orphan, okay? But for the second man, because he has belief, because he believes in the unseen, because he believes in resurrection, because he believes in the afterlife, everything looks like is in a positive light to him, okay? And by the way, when it talks about these like pessimistic versus the optimistic mindsets, these mindsets come from belief, right? If you don't have belief, you end up falling into this pessimistic mindset because you're saying all the hardship and suffering it has no meaning and well all death is just eternal annihilation. But when you have belief, that leads to an optimistic mindset because you're saying when I die I'm going to be able to go to paradise. All the people that I'm separate from, I'm going to be able to reunite with them. All of this suffering, it's a test. I'm being, for example, purified of my sins. Okay? So it's perspective, it's your outlook. Okay? That's what this chapter in the Risale-i Nur is talking about. Now, I'm going to have to stop here because I don't want to make this video too long. But I hope you guys were able to benefit from this. And inshallah, I will see you guys next time.